I stood there, breathing in the scent of dry grass and dust, the smell of my childhood. But the peace was instantly shattered. From across the newly paved cul-de-sac, Constance came tearing toward me. Her face a mask of purple fury, her phone held high like a weapon. I called the sheriff. "You are trespassing on private HOA property? This land belongs to us now. Get off my cul-de-sac," she shrieked, her voice echoing off the newly built stucco McMansions. I didn't even have time to pull out the massive, tattered scroll that was my grandfather's original deed. The one with the hand-drawn plat map from 1928. She lunged. Actually lunged, trying to rip the keys out of my hand. Convinced that I, the rightful owner, was nothing more than a vagrant trying to steal a rusty gate. I sidestepped her, hearing the distinct crunch of gravel under the tires of an approaching vehicle. And that's when everything went wrong. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment. What would you do if this happened to you? And subscribe to HOA Files. My name is Noah, and for most of my life I've been a city guy, a digital nomad who could work from anywhere. I chased the fast life, the bright lights, the hustle. But my roots? They were planted firmly in the Texas soil of my grandpa Silas's ranch. It was 20 acres of scrubland tall mesquite trees, a crumbling stone house, and a barn that looked like it was held together by sheer willpower and cobwebs. Grandpa passed away 5 years ago, and the property Silas's Sunset Ridge has sat dormant ever since, tied up in a complicated estate that finally, transferred to me a few months ago. I hadn't been back in years. I always meant to, but life got in the way. It was remote, outside of any city limits, and known mainly to the county tax assessor. Or so I thought. When I finally drove out there last month, I got the first hint that things weren't as I remembered. The dusty, mile-long dirt track that used to lead to the property was now a beautifully paved road, complete with faux gas lamps and manicured hedges. I saw a sign, "Welcome to the Estates at Sunset Ridge." The Estates at Sunset Ridge. They had taken the name of my family's land. I drove further. No sinking. Where my grandfather's rickety wooden fence used to stand was now a tall, imposing iron gate secured by a digital keypad. On either side of the property line, where I remembered open range and scattered oak trees, were now rows of identical, massive, brand new houses, the aforementioned McMansions, all stucco and beige and utterly devoid of soul. They were what you get when suburban sprawl meets old money aspirations. I found the original cattle gate to Grandpa's property. The 20 acres I now owned, and it was almost completely hidden by a row of newly planted cypress trees. It hadn't been touched. It was still the old, rusty, heavy gate my grandpa and I used to wrestle open together. I felt a swell of protective anger. They had built an entire community around my property, using its name, but thankfully hadn't built on it. Yet I got out of my truck, and that's when I met Constance. Constance lived in the house right on the corner, Lot 1. She was the definition of an HOA Karen. Tight floral print athleisure. A visor permanently glued to her forehead and eyes that missed nothing. She was clearly the queen bee of this whole beige hive. She saw my beat-up Ford Ranger and my dusty clothes, and she instantly came over, radiating disapproval. "You're not supposed to be here," she declared without a hello or welcome. "I'm Noah, the owner of the land through that gate," I said, pointing to the rusty structure. She laughed a short, brittle sound. "Oh, honey, that old shack? No one owns that. It's been abandoned for years. It's an eyesore and a safety hazard. The HOA has been maintaining the perimeter. I assure you, I own it. I just finalized the paperwork. It's 20 acres. Her smile vanished. "Absolutely not. The plat maps for the estates at Sunset Ridge clearly indicate that everything outside the perimeter walls, which, by the way, you are standing on the wrong side of his common land. We use that area for the annual Easter egg hunt. You need to turn your truck around and leave. You're scaring the children? Scaring the children?" The closest child was probably a mile away, texting their friends. I held up my copy of the new deed, fresh from the county. "Constance, this is the original Lot 17, and it's 20 acres. It was never incorporated into your development. It was excluded entirely," she scoffed. Your paperwork is likely fraudulent. The title company gave us assurances. You need to stop trespassing immediately. I'm calling the HOA lawyer. I knew what she was doing. She was trying to intimidate me into leaving. I was already exhausted from the drive, but I planted my feet. Call whoever you want. I'm staying, and I'm opening that gate. I wrestled the heavy, rusty gate open. It screeched in protest. A wonderfully loud sound, and I drove my truck onto the land. Parking right next to the dilapidated stone house, I looked back and saw Constance furiously snapping photos of my license plate. This was going to be a battle. I just didn't realize it would be a siege. The next few weeks were a constant, exhausting battle of escalating pettiness. I started making basic repairs. The stone house was structurally sound, but needed a ton of work. I began clearing brush. That same day, got my first official HOA violation. Unauthorized storage of debris and unsightly materials. They had taken photos of the piles of natural brush I was clearing. Natural brush. I ignored it, knowing I wasn't bound by their covenants. But the notice was a clear sign they weren't backing down. Then came the second incident, something more aggressive. I found a string of what looked like white plastic flags tied to the old stone house, right across the front door. With a little note, condemned, awaiting demolition permitting. I tore them down, my anger spiking. They were trying to fabricate a condemnation order. I called the county fire marshal immediately, who assured me the house wasn't condemned and that they had received an unusual number of calls from one address regarding the property. I knew Constance was desperate to get rid of my eyesore so she could claim the land and turn it into the community dog park she'd been championing, but she was relying on the fact that I was an absentee owner who wouldn't put up a fight. She was wrong. The next escalation was personal. I had a few simple tools: a shovel, a rake, a small generator, and a big cooler of water chained to an old post outside the house, since I didn't have power yet. I came back from a supply run one afternoon, and the cooler was gone. The chain was cut. All my tools were scattered and broken. I knew it was Constance. No one else cared. It was a petty act of vandalism intended to discourage me. I felt a pang of despair. She's never going to stop, I thought. She's going to make my life hell until I sell. I stood there, looking at the broken shovel handle, and I realized I had to change my approach. I couldn't fight her pettiness with my own. I needed to hit her with something she understood: authority and legal finality. I was done being subtle. The major turning point came the next week. I had hired a legitimate county-certified surveyor to mark my exact boundaries. I wanted absolute proof. I was watching him work when Constance suddenly appeared, flanked by her husband, meek, silent man, and Gary, the HOA manager. "Stop this immediately." Constance shrieked at the surveyor. "You are trespassing. This is HOA common property, and we've already secured the plat." The surveyor, a tough old guy named Rex, just kept sighting through his equipment. "Ma'am, I'm marking lot 17, 20 acres. The boundaries are confirmed by the county registrar's office." Constance pulled out a laminated, colorful HOA plat map. It was clearly a cheap, doctored thing. "Look, see, right here. This land is labeled Future Amenity Area. Your line is wrong. I'm calling the police." Rex finally lowered his equipment and looked at her, deadpan. "Ma'am, a laminated HOA map doesn't trump a county survey. I suggest you step back, or I'm adding obstruction of a licensed professional to my notes." Constance was beside herself. She physically shoved the surveyor's tripod, knocking it to the ground. "You will not do this. This is my view. This is my community." That was it. That physical act of aggression, the attempted destruction of evidence, I knew I had her. The surveyor was furious and called the police himself. But Constance was too high on her own entitlement to care. While the police were en route, she grabbed a can of bright orange spray paint from her husband's hand. He was holding it like a nervous schoolboy, and she ran onto the middle of my land. "Toward the old stone house. If you won't leave," she screamed. "A sound of absolute mania, we will mark it as ours." She proceeded to spray paint a colossal, sloppy HOA property across the entire front wall of my historic stone house, right next to the flag she'd tried to use to condemn it. I stood there, watching the orange paint cover the old, worn stone, feeling a cold, burning realization. She had gone completely off the rails. She wasn't just petty anymore. She was destructively, criminally insane. I knew the police would arrive, and it would be a messy misdemeanor. But I needed more. I needed to bury her completely. I needed final, crushing payback. The moment the police car pulled up, I didn't run to them. I walked straight to my truck and pulled out the massive, brittle linen scroll, the original 1928 Silas Harding Ranch deed. It was the legal foundation of everything. The police officer, a young deputy, tried to mediate. Okay, folks, what's the issue here? Constance, still panting from her spray paint rampage, pointed a trembling finger at me. He's a trespasser. He's destroying our common land. And he assaulted my husband. He's trying to build a shack and ruin our property values. I want him arrested for criminal trespass. I stepped forward, my voice calm and firm. Officer, I am the legal owner of this 20-acre parcel, Lot 17, known as the Silas Harding Ranch. I have the deed. She has vandalized my property, attempted to obstruct a county licensed surveyor, and filed false reports to the fire marshal. Handed the deputy my new deed and the old 1928 scroll. The deputy's eyes widened when he saw the age and official stamps on the original document. Ma'am, do you have a deed or a court order that supersedes this? He asked Constance, holding up my property document. We have the HOA plat map, she insisted, shoving her laminated paper into his face. It was incorporated by community consensus. I am the president of the Architectural Review Board. The deputy sighed. Ma'am, an HOA plat map does not supersede a county land registry deed. You need to step back. The surveyor confirms his boundaries. Then came the absolute checkmate moment. My lawyer, who I had instructed to wait for my signal, drove up in a sleek black car. He didn't come alone. He brought a second official, stern-looking man in a clean suit, the county assessor. The assessor walked straight over to the deputy. Deputy, I'm here to confirm the boundary of Lot 17, and I'm here to address the matter of the road. Constance immediately jumped on him. Yes, tell him he can't use our road. It's a private cul-de-sac, maintained by the HOA. He can't get to his ugly shack on our pavement. The assessor turned to her, his voice devoid of emotion. Ma'am, in 2005, when the estates at Sunset Ridge was developed, your developer needed access to the main road. The only way to get permission was to grant a permanent, non-exclusive easement across the entire length of the development road to the contiguous property, Lot 17, in perpetuity. Constance frowned. An easement? What are you talking about? It means, the assessor continued, his gaze sweeping over the whole street of McMansions, that you were only granted approval to build this community on the condition that you provide permanent access to the old Harding Ranch, your entire development. And this cul-de-sac you're so protective of serves as the legal, permanent driveway for Lot 17. The road is essentially his driveway, which you also get to use. A stunned silence fell over the cul-de-sac. Constance's face was a masterpiece of disbelief. She finally understood the historical legal trap she had fallen into. The land she wanted to claim was not only mine, but her entire community was legally subservient to my access needs. I felt a wave of triumph so strong it almost made me dizzy. The deputy looked at the spray-painted wall. The surveyor nodded his thanks. Constance's husband, Gary, finally spoke, his voice a terrified whisper. Constance, the deed. The papers from the developer. They said the road was contingent on the easement. ... Shut up, Gary, she hissed. But the fight had gone out of her. The police officer calmly arrested Constance for vandalism and assault on the surveyor. She was led away in handcuffs, still screaming about the dog park and property values. But this time, her screams were muffled by the reality of the law. The emotional resolution came slowly, like the sun setting over the dusty ranch. I didn't press charges for all the minor vandalism, only for the spray painting and the assault on the surveyor. I didn't want a long legal battle. I wanted peace. Constance was fined heavily and forced to pay for the professional cleaning of the stone house. She also resigned from the HOA in disgrace, unable to face her neighbors after her spectacularly public defeat. I'm living on the ranch now, cleaning it up slowly, honoring my grandfather's memory. The neighbors are suddenly very polite, waving to me as I drive down my driveway. They learned the moral lesson. Never try to bully someone out of their rightful inheritance, especially when their family has been there for nearly a century. And that easement? I've been thinking about getting a few very loud, very antique tractors for my new life as a rancher. I wonder if the HOA covenants have anything to say about agricultural vehicle noise at 5 a.m.